So here we have a terribly abused 90 RM 125 motor. It's been left out in the back of the shop for about 20 plus years with the side case off of it, exposed to rain, wind. You can see I had to actually take a hose and rinse this motor out because it's so full of dirt and sand and garbage. So we're going to do some experimenting with it and show you some tricks and tips on how to take a motor apart. I don't know if this will actually come apart because some of the shafts I'm sure are rusted to the bearings in here, but it did turn over. I got it to turn over. The top end was shot. This is actually the cylinder right here for this thing, and some of the plating you can see up there, up here by the exhaust bridge, actually broke free and got into the piston and chewed it up pretty good. Let's see. This is the head. You can see across to the top of the squash band right here, where the debris actually beat itself into the cylinder head. Now this can be fixed at a machine shop. What I'm going to do with the other one, the other RM motor, is send it over and have a big bore kit put in it, and they redo all this for the squash band and compression ratio and everything else. But on this one, I just want to show you this tool that a guy made for me like 30 years ago. So we're going to do that. Let me get this all set up and I'll show you. I'm going to try and get the circle clip out. They're a little stubborn. This one doesn't even matter though, because it falls in the motor. It's no big deal. We're going to split the cases on this thing anyway. Let's use a little pick and got in there and pop the pin loose. Anyway, so what we're going to do is, this is just a piece of 3/4 inch PVC, 6-inch bolt. This is 5/16. The big washer on the end. Bolt. This bolt actually fits inside of the wrist pin area of the piston. Slide this through to the other side. There it is, wrist pin. This cost me less than $2 at a hardware store, and so you don't have to go out and buy an expensive puller. This thing has been doing it this way for 30 years. On some of them, if this is really tight, you have to take the wrist pin out of both sides. But fits right through there. So if you're doing an 80 or a smaller one, you might have to use a smaller rod, like a 1/4 inch rod, which would be a smaller bolt. But you can also use some kind of spacer in there, so you don't have to run the bolt through there. You can put a spacer on there, so this will pull the spacer through, which in turn will pull the pin through at the same time. So let's have some more fun with the blown up, seized up, neglected 125 motor. See what else can come off of this motor. Only a little bit of dirt in there. You can see it's an airtight fit. There's no corrosion in there inside of the splines in there. Everything else is a mess. So we'll keep going. Gotta go to a little bigger hammer. This thing is really frozen on there. Been sitting out off for 20 years, so coming off. Came off. Hey, how about that? If I can get into it. It's only a little brittle. Flatten out this washer right there and take this big nut off. Should be a 27 millimeter. That's what the other bike is. Washer, so I'm going to flatten it a lot. You don't have to go that far with it. See if this will even come out of there. Oh, it's stuck pretty good. Good grief. Yeah. Amazingly, that doesn't look too bad. Everything else, horrible. Yeah, it's not going to be much in this motor to be salvaged. You can see through the back, all the transmission gears, they all look like this. The crank, believe it or not, might be salvageable. It's because they had the cylinder head still stuck on it. They took it apart to see what was broken in the motor, but it was just sitting on there, so that kind of kept a lot of the water out. You can still see in the crank it still has grease in there, so I mean that's a good thing. So let's see if I can get the cases split on it. That'd be interesting. Inside of the spacer on the crankshaft looks good. There's no rust on it. There's no rust on the inside of that. And looks like the crank itself is in good shape. So, might have a rebuildable core. So if you ever wanted to take out these screws that are in the case, these are really in there strong. With up there, I think there's a thread sealer on them too. You have to use one of these. You can get them at like Harbor Freight. It's an impact driver for these type of screws. Stick it in there. Should just come right out. Without this, all you do is strip out the tops of the screws and you end up having to drill them out. So with this, no problem. Come right out. There's your power valve assembly. And two little screws. Finish splitting, see if we can split the cases. I have to take this gear off. Snap. Little tiny washer. Usually you have to pry on this stuff with a screwdriver to get it off, but this thing is, like I say, 20 years of sitting in the back of a shop, open. Everything's a mess. It doesn't really matter if I pry on something with a screwdriver because most of this is going in the trash anyway. Yay, it's trash. Shift shaft, see if it'll come out. There again, this is something you don't have to beat out with a screwdriver and hammer. Same thing. This is the shift pawl. It goes back to the shift drum. There's 2 screws right here. If you're splitting cases, you don't have to take this apart. There's a little spring loaded. These may not move. And it still moves. There's spring loaded paws right here on the top and bottom. There's springs inside there with little pins. Yeah, so anyway, you don't have to take this apart. Oh, breaking free. Oh, it's breaking through a little bit. I think it's just this sprocket right here. That bearing is rusted so bad. This is supposed to come off and stay in the case. This is what was holding it up. So I did the cardinal sin and I actually put a punch in the back here to help separate the cases. Bad idea. So what I actually had to do is, drive this back down, this whole assembly back down into the case. Usually this doesn't happen, because everything is rusted together, so you just shouldn't have to beat on it with a 5-pound sledgehammer. See, the crank is still surprisingly good shape. Some of these upper gears may be salvageable. Everything on the bottom is just all corroded and rusted. Another neat thing is this is the drain plug that's been out for 20 years, so no oil, no lubrication. And the motor, the gears for a rust bucket, they're actually in pretty good shape. I'm looking through it, looking for chips and such, and there's no chips or such, but can't really use the shafts. I had to beat the shafts off because the shift forks were frozen in there. They're rusted together. So the shafts are no good, but most of the gears are really good shape, which is, I thought, really surprising. Look at this, it's just frozen on there. But if you look at all the gears, they're in pretty good shape. I didn't see any chips or big cracks in them. But, I don't know. Good for spares, because we're redoing the 92, and this is the same engine family, so that's the only reason why I took it apart, was this for just in case, because a lot of these gears are no longer available. And it's nice to have spare parts, so this is why I took and beat this thing apart, is for the spare parts. Anyway, I thought it was kind of amazing that the motor inside looks as good as it does.